the story of Bly before the Clone Wars. The beginning of his training contains an inconsistency. Star Wars Bust Collection 53 asserts that Bly was a first-generation clone personally trained by Jango Fett. And it seems correct, but there is a nuance. Let's delve into how the clone army was actually created. In the Disney canon, the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic was significantly simplified, which deprived the event of its importance. In the legends, the Kaminoans approached the Order with particular caution. No one had ever attempted such an experiment on such a scale before. Of course, there were also the Arcanians, who were also excellent cloning specialists and other little-known projects, but they all had their flaws and problems. The Kaminoans wanted to create their ideal, and they approached this ideal gradually, as happens in real scientific research. The so-called beta test of the clone army, which in the future would be called ARC Class 0, was a failure. Aside from the fact that 50% of the subjects died in the early stages, the surviving specimens did not meet expectations. Physically and intellectually, these clones exceeded all expectations. But they were uncontrollable, which rendered all other successes meaningless. An army is worthless if it cannot be controlled. Thanks to horrific experiments on these clones, the first batch was made more loyal. They had to sacrifice physical and intellectual skills for the sake of obedience, but the results were still excellent. They were called RC Class Alpha. But the Kaminoans were still not satisfied. The clones still exhibited disobedience, high aggressiveness, and independent thinking. They wanted to destroy them all as defective, but then the Mandalorians intervened. The Nulls were taken in by Cal Skirata, and Fett personally mentored Alpha. In these ranks, according to the magazine, was Bly. The second generation managed to be more loyal, but again at the expense of everything else. They were called Republic Commandos, who became the second generation of the clone army. Here, in fact, it would be worth going into all these moments in more detail, but the video is not about that. The second generation again did not show ideal results. Experimenting even more with Jango Fett's DNA, the Kaminoans managed to achieve what they wanted, completely obedient and loyal soldiers who, although physically and intellectually inferior to their prototypes, surpassed naturally born representatives of the human race in all parameters. Naturally, each generation had its own numbers and designations. The Nulls had the prefix N to their numbers, resulting in N6 or N12. The Alphas had the prefix Alpha, like Alpha 17, who took the name himself, or Clone Spar, who was Alpha 02. The Republic Commandos had the prefix RC, and the third generation was named CT, Clone Trooper. Each generation had its own specific training. Due to the fact that the third generation of clones made up the majority of the army, as it became regular, essentially the mainstay, there is also a gradation within it. I will not go into detail about it. We are specifically interested in the CCC, Clone Commander. Such a designation was and is still used for Bly, CC-5052, indicating his affiliation with the third generation, which did not undergo training by Jango. There is also an inconsistency in the storyline related to his rank. In some sources he is a clone commander, while in other sources he is a martial commander. At what point he earned such a rank is unknown to us. What is known is that those with such ranks command corps. The 327th, which he will command, is precisely a corps. In general, nothing is clear but very interesting as always. After Jango, he trained with other future clone commanders under Alpha 17. Despite the training program emphasizing independence and unconventional thinking, this was foreign to Bly. He maintained unwavering loyalty and relied not on creative thinking but on protocols and regulations. Here is his quote: "Know the mission, know your enemy. Complete the mission, kill the enemy. That's all I need. That's all any soldier needs." The Clone Wars. He missed the first battle of Geonosis, which most likely saved his life. That battle is considered a grand victory for the Republic, as some say. The first battle of Geonosis was quick and intensive, and the victory came at a very high price. But he didn't have a long time to stay in the rear. He and the 327th Star Corps, which was placed under his command, went to the planet Eskandar, where he had his baptism of fire and met the most beautiful Jedi from the legends, Aayla Secura. Quinlan Voss had intelligence that the CIS was developing a new battle droid on Iskandar, and our heroes were sent there. Upon landing, the Republican forces got bogged down in the mud, as the planet did not boast a good climate. Soon they were attacked by droids on speeders which, unlike humans and walkers, were not hindered by the mud. Suffering heavy losses, the Republicans managed to hijack some of the speeders and evacuate the wounded clones, including Bly, to the shuttle. The commander was very disappointed by his injury, as he felt he had failed his general and the Republic, but Ayla reassured him. By nature, this girl was quite kind, which helped her cool the fiery disposition of the soldier. Seeing him and the others off to the shuttle, she decided to complete the mission alone, but found nothing, as it was all a trap. Instead of engineers from the Techno-Union, she encountered Ventress, which marked the final retreat of the Republic. During the regrouping, their fleet task force fell into another CIS ambush in orbit around Quell. Bly, desiring to put an end to this streak of failures, interrupted his treatment and alongside the Jedi engaged in meeting the enemy's landing forces. To their aid came the fleet of the renowned 501st Legion, commanded by Anakin Skywalker with Ahsoka Tano. The rescue mission was significantly delayed, and Ayla's fleet had already been shattered, with the personnel almost entirely wiped out. The rescue itself was not without flaws. From the very beginning, the rescue team was already asking for help. Nevertheless, they managed to rendezvous with Ayla and Bly, who were fighting their way through the droid army. When the rescuers were about to transfer them to the Resolute on a Consular-class frigate, the hyperdrive activated during the docking process. Thus, fate led them to Maridun, home to the Lurmen, indigenous residents of Mygeeto. What were the residents of Mygeeto doing on this planet? It was all because of the Moons, who had taken over their planet and enslaved the locals. During their travels, Bly learned a lesson from his general while she was mentoring the young Ahsoka. Ayla noted the Padawan's emotional attachment to her master, which is a weakness. In war, all emotions must be set aside and operate in cohesive groups, forgetting personal preferences. Bly admired that his general could be so gentle and caring, yet at the same time become stern and cold-blooded when necessary. But they were not the only guests on this planet. The Separatists had also arrived there to test their new weapon. The soldier was amazed at how the local people resignedly accepted their fate as a testing ground. A clone, bred for war, could not understand the concept of pacifism. But once again, Ayla intervened. She explained that there is no exclusively right way of life and everyone determines their own path independently. What also surprised him was that the Jedi did not engage in direct confrontation with the pacifism of the local people. She followed her path and began preparing the village for defense, thereby choosing her own way, gradually winning over the locals. The moral of such an act is that there is no need to persuade anyone of anything. The opponent must come to this realization on their own, weighing the decision independently. When the battle began, the Lurmen joined forces with the clones and the Jedi. Together they managed to defeat the Separatist army and capture a rather caricatured villain. As the war progressed, Bly and Ayla grew increasingly attached to each other. The commander admired his general, primarily due to her combat experience. Few Jedi could boast of such, which often resulted in fatal mistakes on the part of the light side adherents, costing the lives of clones. Ayla Secura had smelled gunpowder. She often worked behind enemy lines and on the front lines. Bly was very interested in all these stories. Listening to them, he discovered the galaxy and many of its aspects which were not accessible in the training program on Kamino. Ayla also learned much from Bly. It is said that a person is shaped by their surroundings. Through her interactions with the clone, she became less impulsive and more rational. They, one might say, complemented each other. Their friendly relations formed a firm trust in one another. The Jedi often had to detach herself from the unit and embark on espionage operations such as the mission on Deveron or the infiltration of the Wheels Station. Fortunately, she could calmly entrust command to Bly, who eagerly awaited their next joint mission. They fought on planets like Alzok 3 and Florum, acting as one cohesive unit. On Alzok 3, they conducted reconnaissance with the 41st Elite Corps, Bligh often had to liaise with scouts, as Ayala always preferred covert missions. This formed a decent friendship among him, Gree, Neo, and Bakara. With the latter two he had much in common. He even adopted their approach to combat operations and tactical decisions. This led the 327th Star Corps to earn the reputation as one of the most ruthless units of the Grand Army of the Republic. Ayala did not share Bligh's aggressive tactics, but often heeded his opinions, sometimes fully entrusting decisions to his hands. This had its consequences, some positive, some negative. On the positive side, Bligh, in the manner of Bakara, sent his unit to undertake the ARC program, improving their combat effectiveness. Negatively, the growing ruthlessness and uncompromising nature of the unit could be noted. For instance, Bligh did not see the need to take witnesses, preferring execution on the spot. 17 months after the first battle on Geonosis, Bligh and the 327th Star Corps fought against Mandalorian defenders at New Holstis. Sakura and her troops advanced with heavy losses. Ayla was frightened by the monstrous casualty statistics among the soldiers. At one point, she wanted to halt the advance, but Bligh said, "Clones were indeed created to die, but not before completing their mission. They had neither passports nor any properties, no apartments were allotted to them, and there was no question of any pension." Many Jedi philosophized that clones would have a happy future beyond the war. Ayla had a more realistic view of the world, and this situation in particular. Most likely because she had seen much bad in her life, with neither the Order nor the Republic doing anything about it. Therefore, she humbly accepted Bligh's opinion and reminded herself that one must be cold-blooded in war. The enemy was completely defeated. Some Mandalorians managed to escape, while the rest were exterminated on the spot. Bligh was accounting for all deficiencies, reaching up to 60% of the personnel, and many surviving clones were wounded. Ayla was amazed that despite all this, the soldiers were already forming up and preparing to head to the next slaughterhouse. Bligh himself, also injured in the last battle, stood at attention and waited for the signal. Because of this approach to war, they often stitched wounds while being transferred to the next battlefield. Ayla frequently stitched the commander's wounds and he hers. Continuing their work with Sakura, the 327th was sent to Honogga. It was believed that the LH-1740 core ship of the Confederacy, Hyena, was transporting a new defoliant toxin, trihexylophene 1138, with the intent to use it on Naboo. An acclimator under the command of Jedi General Rike N attacked Hyena, damaging the vessel so severely that it crashed on Honogga, turning the planet into a devastated world with a ruined ecology. During the battle, N's ship also sustained severe damage and was forced to make an emergency landing on the planet. Investigating the incident, the Jedi tracked a set of scientific equipment, which we will henceforth refer to as NSS, Notable Scientific Set. This equipment pertained to trihexylophene 1138 and contained all information about it. It was taken to the Rakata temple by the local natives, the Nogri. N tried to retrieve the NSS, but the locals killed him. Ayla, Sakura, Bligh, and a small squad of soldiers managed to reach the planet's surface and then proceeded through the forests of Honogga to the Rakata temple. Ayla hoped they could retrieve the NSS unnoticed, but the Nogri ambushed the group. The group retreated to the temple. The clones operated using standardized tactics. The rearguard soldier stops and fires back until he dies. After his death, the next soldier takes his place. This tactic allowed the group to survive. Bligh and Sakura were the only remaining Republic forces on the planet. Fending off the horde of Nogri warriors, the pair was rescued by Quinlan Vos, who was also a Jedi. Officially, he was considered a traitor and a dark disciple. In reality, he was an agent within the enemy camp. He and Ayla shared a common past and close relationship. She saw him as a father figure or an older brother. Bligh immediately recognized Vos, the Jedi defector who had joined the CIS. Ayla immediately defended Vos, knowing that the commander's conversations with the Republic's enemies were brief. Were it not for the respect for Ayla, things might have ended tragically. Ayla confronted the commander directly for the first time. Though they had taught each other much and in doing so became similar, their views still held many contradictions. Bligh obeyed but kept Vos within his sights, primarily protecting Ayla, whom he considered too trusting. Vos, as a gesture of goodwill, offered Sakura assistance in obtaining the NSS, and the general accepted this offer. Thanks to the information that N provided before his death, the trio knew where the data was stored in the temple. The more challenging task was eliminating the Nogri guards. Bly bravely stepped out alone, drawing enemy fire to himself, while Sakura and Voss stealthily dealt with the enemy guards. Reaching the room with the NSS, Voss noted that the area was booby-trapped with poisonous darts. Although the Jedi worked together with the team to extract the device, the trap was triggered. Fortunately for the trio, no one was harmed, allowing them to leave the temple unscathed. Ayla was glad that Quinlan had truly ended up on their side, though it was a pity she had rushed to conclusions. Voss demanded the holocron for himself. When the Jedi ignited their lightsabers, Bly, with a look that said, "I told you, fool," opened fire on the traitor. But he wasn't the only one who was alert. Quinlan, using a force push, hurled the clone into the walls. By that time, Bly had been actively keeping his own journal in which he described his feelings from various uses of the Force on him. He and Ayla loved sparring, and Bly insisted that the Jedi not hold back and fight with full strength. But the Force blows he received in training with her were never as powerful as the one he received from Voss. The clone lost consciousness and came to at the end of the duel, where Quinlan emerged victorious. Voss was already preparing to deliver the final blow, but Bly, with his last bit of strength, intervened for the girl, shooting the traitor in the shoulder. Due to severe concussion, it was difficult for him to make out his target, and thus he failed to eliminate it. By the time Bly pulled himself together, he finally managed to aim for a fatal shot. But Ayla intervened again. During this distraction, Quinlan managed to escape, which Sakura summed up as a failure of her mission. The commander did not report that his general had protected the traitor, but sincerely did not understand why she was upset. They managed to retrieve the holocron from the planet, and Voss did not get it. Does not get it. We completed the assignment, but the general behaves as if we have failed. What if the traitor escaped? Or that he is an enemy? Why can she not accept it as a fact and forget? Her connection with the traitor is a breach in her success. Why was his general disappointed? The answer lies in the relationship between Voss and Ayla. The latter half of the Clone Wars further separated Ayla and Bly. The girl went on her own missions and Bly went on his. The commander had to divide his unit as they were required on several planets at once. For this he promoted especially distinguished soldiers, among whom was Davis Salukami. In 19 BBY, Sakura, Bly and the 327th Star Corps were sent to Salukami, where a prolonged siege was underway. The Confederacy used underground caves beneath the planet's capital for cloning warriors, Mogukai, who were subsequently trained by the Anzati. During the siege, Bly closely collaborated with other commanders, Neo and Faye. Here, the clone also met his old acquaintance, Quinlan Voss, who was on the side of the Republic, and even had soldiers from the 41st Elite Corps of Scouts under his command. Under his command was in fact Commander Faye, who, like Bly, did not hide his hatred for the traitor. Their mutual dislike for this adept of the light forged a bond between them. Bly tried not to take his eyes off Quinlan, and always stood in his way whenever he tried even to look in the direction of Ayla. Sakura, however, wanted to talk to Voss. She asked Bly to contact Voss and invite him for a conversation, but Quinlan refused to communicate in the presence of a clone who would draw his blaster from the holster every time he was nearby. Nevertheless, Sakura met with Voss, sending Bly on various errands. Thanks to her persuasive skills, the commander did not suspect any foul play. The next day, the Republic forces entered the capital of Salukimai, and Bly once again fought shoulder to shoulder with his general. The battles raged ceaselessly. At times the Republic attacked, and at other times the Separatists. Both sides suffered enormous losses, failing to achieve their goals. On one of the nights, the Mogukai clones attacked the camp, forcing most of the Jedi involved in the Salukimai campaign to be distracted. Bly also fought, defending the camp, but the battle turned out to be nothing more than a diversionary tactic. The true target was the operations commander Oppo Ranchisis, who was found dead in his quarters. He was killed by the Confederacy agent Sora Bulk. Nonetheless, the Republic forces continued their attacks, albeit without the advantage of Rancisis's battle meditation. During the final assault, Sakura and Voss infiltrated the cloning chamber catacombs. Meanwhile, the other Jedi intended to eliminate the large planetary ion cannon that was hindering the Republic fleet from moving over the city and bombarding the Confederacy positions. Bly and his men were tasked with ensuring that no warrior Morgukai left the enemy base alive. When the ion cannon was destroyed, Bly became worried about his Jedi and suggested to General Sharad Het to send an evacuation team, but the Jedi refused, urging the commander to continue the fight. In the end, the Confederacy base was destroyed and the enemy forces were routed. Bulk and other separatist leaders perished in the battle, and the siege of Sulukimai was practically crushed. Bly was very relieved that his general survived. They immediately set out to tend to their wounds and board the shuttles as the siege of Felucia awaited them ahead. En route to Felucia, Bly and Sakura were ordered to investigate the wooded moon of Endor for any presence of a Confederacy base. They quickly discovered the base, but it was empty. However, everywhere there were destroyed battle droids and clone armor, which turned out to have been killed and likely eaten by the Ewoks of Episode 6, that is, after the evacuation. Bly's and Sakura's squad moved on to Felucia itself. During a training battle with Sakura, Bly was informed that there had been no news from Barriss Offee, who had been sent to Felucia several weeks earlier to track down the Separatist Council member Shu Mai. Additionally, Sakura's subcommand had passed to Padawan Ikria, and they immediately began preparations for the attack. On the way to Felucia, Master Yoda contacted them, requesting all Jedi within reach of Coruscant to return to the capital immediately, which had come under sudden attack. Ayla was furious, not understanding how they had missed such a massive army entering the capital. Bly concluded that Dooku had lured as many Jedi as possible into the Outer Rim, drawing them out of the capital's reach, making it vulnerable. Ayla ordered the fleet to be deployed and to immediately go to aid, but the commander did not comply. Bly reasoned that they were too far away, and the mission on Felucia remained a priority, since the Chancellor himself had designated this planet as a target. He already had failures in his service record, and he did not want to add to that list. Ikria intervened in the heated argument. She agreed and supported the clone's opinion. Capturing Shu Mai and destroying the factories on Felucia would be far more beneficial than sending the fleet to the capital, where the fighting was already in full swing. Sakura yielded to the commander, and they silently continued their course. The battles for Felucia were also quite fierce, but the 327th was already accustomed to such intensity. I will not delve into the battle in detail. Let me point out a few moments. To bolster their ranks, they headed to a detention facility to free Barriss Offee and her Padawan Zonda. Yes, in the legends, Barriss Offee had a Padawan, and she did not betray the order. Bly wanted to break through to the prisoners the old-fashioned way, using weapons and brute force, but he was stopped by Ayla. As the Twi'lek had once told him, she was capable of influencing others not only through the Force. Ayla Sakura, unlike most Jedi, wore more practical clothing, to some degree quite revealing. Bly had not particularly addressed this matter before, but now he saw how she used her outfit and her appearance. She slightly lowered her top, thus increasing her neckline, and the guards of Gossam immediately forgot that they were in a war and gladly escorted the lady to the captives. Bly followed them with a surprised expression. Having freed the prisoners, the Republic Army increased its forces and accelerated its advance. Ikria managed to find a route to Shu Mai's residence outside the city of Queteao. Sakura and her army were able to break through the defenses and penetrate Shu Mai's territory. To Sakura's disappointment, the leader of the Confederacy had long been gone. The Separatists released deadly toxins into the air. As soon as Ikria realized it was a trap, Sakura ordered all her troops to leave the area. Moments after Bly and the Jedi escaped, Shu Mai's operational base exploded, resulting in significant losses among the clone troopers. In the final push, the 327th was divided into 3 strike groups meant to meet the remnants of the regrouped droid army. After the final briefing, when the officers and soldiers had just started to disperse on the comlink, Bly received the call with the infamous Order 66. There are 2 main versions of the subsequent events. They completely contradict each other and are unconfirmed in any way. The first version states that the betrayal by the girl, with whom he had fought through the entire war, entrusting her with his life and the lives of his brothers, enraged Bly so much that he specifically ordered to shoot her at the stomach level, so that she would suffer and writhe in pain for as long as possible. The second version says that Bly simply could not believe this order, but knew that it had to be carried out. The clones fired in such a way that she did not have time to feel any kind of pain. I will not tell the other versions, since they are all very similar to these two, and differ only in a few additions. Some said that Bly had feelings for her, while others claimed that they had secretly married, but these are mostly rumors from the fan community. In fact, yes, this story begs for a romantic line with a rather interesting love triangle, as Kit Fisto was also involved. We believe that Bly and the other clones pursued only one goal: to kill the girl as quickly as possible, not because of feelings as you might have thought, but because she was a very skilled warrior who, if there was the slightest hesitation, could immediately cut down all the officers and disappear into the thick jungle. This is more logical from the perspective of Bly's character and the unit as a whole. Not taking risks, Bly ordered his troops to inspect Sakura's corpse, confirming her death. Via comlink, the commander was confirmed the death of Barriss Offee, but Zonda, Ekria, and another Jedi, Logan, managed to escape, which disappointed the commander. He was neither proud nor pleased with his deed. After all, it was his friend with whom he had gone through the entire war. They received an order to immediately head to Kamino. The attempts to stop the toxin spread were immediately halted, and subsequent deaths from the poison were blamed on the Jedi, including the deceased Sakura. Bly did not confirm this report, and silently continued his way home. On Kamino, the clone commanders met to affirm their loyalty to the regime and discuss the situation. In the Disney canon, this meeting was omitted as unnecessary, but in the legends it remained, and had special significance since there were no chips then, and some units or entire legions refused to carry out Order 66. Act 3. Service to the Empire. Shortly after Sakura's death, the Republic became the Galactic Empire. After the declaration of a new order, Bly continued to serve under Palpatine's new regime and was sent to Utapau to suppress protests. This work did not particularly appeal to him. From a commander who led troops against a dangerous enemy, he turned into a policeman who mainly stood against peaceful population. During the operation with Bly and his fellow soldier Gali, Darth Vader contacted them. He reminded Bly that there were still unfinished missions on his record and then offered the commander an opportunity to finally complete one of them. Bly was very pleased with this. Finally, he would take on the task for which he had been groomed. Sent to Coruscant, the commander met with Imperial Intelligence Director Armand Izard, as well as Inquisitors Antinnis Tremaine and Lanu Pasik, who were tracking the fugitive Padawans Ekria and Logan. Xander had already been executed by Vader by that time, allowing Bly to focus on the two surviving fugitives. The clone was interrogated about his personal experience working with the Padawans, as they couldn't be found. The Padawans were always one step ahead. The soldier praised them, especially Ekria, who had demonstrated her talent infiltrating enemy networks on Felucia. Bly suggested that she had done something similar with the Imperial network. Izard insisted that no one had hacked his intelligence network, but the commander noted that the director had never worked with Jedi before and greatly underestimated them. The director proposed placing access markers on specific data nodes that would alert the intelligence agency when they were hacked by Ekria, allowing Tremaine to track the whereabouts of the Padawans. The fugitives were pinpointed in an apartment on Coruscant. But when Bly, Tremaine, and Pasik approached the location, the premises were destroyed by an explosion. The Inquisitor noticed a speeder leaving the area. The group set off in pursuit of the fugitives, chasing them through Coruscant sky lanes. Ekria jumped off the speeder and disappeared, while Logan was captured by Vader's guards as he arrived at the platform. Utilizing the access markers, the commander discovered that Ekria was piloting the freighter Casuistic in Tipasi, presumably to rescue Logan. Vader prepared to confront the young girl, but local gangsters intervened, opposing Darth Vader and distracting him from his main target. While Vader was making mincemeat out of the locals, Bly didn't assist the Dark Lord, prioritizing settling his own debts that had haunted him since the Republic era. They managed to catch up with the girl and riddled her. Enraged, Logan used the Force to throw Bly and his troops against the wall, putting them out of action. The situation unfolded just as it had with him and Ayla. When Bly regained consciousness, he saw the duel between Logan and Vader. This time, no one prevented him from shooting the Padawan, but just like before, Bly shot him in the shoulder, leaving the boy at the mercy of the Dark Lord. Darth Vader struck his blow and allowed the half-dead Padawan to fall to his death. Vader commended Bly for his work and congratulated him on completing his mission. Bly's further story remains unknown, but now let us discuss some interesting facts, starting with a slew of fan comics that crafted their own alternative history, where Ayla Secura is not killed, but rather Bly saves her, and together they flee to Mandalore, where almost all the clones who decided to desert have run too. Initially, the clone in familiar armor did not appear in Episode 3 as you might have thought, but in the comic Star Wars Republic in issue 65, but in the standard Phase 1 Commander armor. He only acquired his full appearance in issue 68. Interestingly, the yellow stripes on his Phase 2 armor were added at the very last moment, while initially they wanted to leave it in standard white. Besides this, the clone also appears in the series of comics about the Siege of Salukami and Twist of Fate. George Lucas really liked this look, which motivated him to add Bly to Episode 3, but even here the clone underwent changes. Initially, he was presented in red armor with all the additional accessories, but at the final stages they decided to repaint the armor in yellow. The concept of the red variant was not discarded, which led to the creation of Bly's friend, Commander Davis. Bly was even supposed to have a huge line with a whole single word in the movie, but the scene was cut, so the clone remains a silent figure in the film as well. Later, he became a frequent guest in various comics, where his number sometimes got confused. Some articles claim he participated in the First Battle of Geonosis, while others, as you might understand, strongly argue that this was not the case. Even before Disney acquired Star Wars, there was an incident with Bly. All because of Barriss Offee, who in Dave Filoni's animated series received a completely different character and story, due to which at the time of the Battle of Felucia she should have been behind bars. Because of this, the entire plotline of Bly's subsequent life in the Empire remained in question. This moment was promised to be dealt with. But because of Disney's acquisition of the franchise and its refusal to delve into the expanded universe, all of this no longer mattered. Commander Bly went through an interesting journey both within his universe and in our own.